There are 6 different heroes in Clash of Clans, and between them there's 41 pieces of equipment. So in this video, I'm going to be going ahead and ranking all 6 of those heroes, and then I'm going to be ranking the equipment for each of these heroes as we go through them. Now this is not just going to be a ranking based on my personal experience. I'm also going to be using all the meta relevant data from the Ranked Warden website, as well as important factors such as how long it's going to take to max a specific hero and how key certain heroes are to the game in general. To start off our list, at number 6 we have the Minion Prince. Now the Minion Prince is an awesome hero that unlocks at Town Hall 9, and the important thing about this hero is his damage capability. The sheer amount of damage that the Minion Prince can do through his attack is a good reason to use him. However, what I think holds back the Minion Prince a little bit is how one-dimensional he can be. He's pretty much exclusively used in air attacks since he doesn't provide too much utility for ground attacks, and you can see this at the highest level of the game where the usage rate for the Minion Prince is pretty high for air attacks, but for ground attacks it's not really that high at all. Furthermore, it takes quite a bit of time to go ahead and unlock the full capability of the Minion Prince, as he has a ton of levels to do. Now when it comes down to equipment, the Minion Prince has 6 different ones that we're going to rank. At number 6 I would go ahead and put the Henchman Puppet. This equipment can be helpful to grab some traps and do a little bit of extra damage, but really falls short compared to the rest of his equipment. At number 5 we have the Noble Pants. The Noble Pants are nice because they can give your Minion Prince some damage reduction and allow him to survive a little bit longer, but remember, the utility of the Prince really comes from the damage that he does, and I don't think this boosts the damage enough or keeps him alive long enough to notice the effects as much as the other equipment. At number 4 we have the Noble Iron, which I think is a solid contender for this spot. This piece of equipment can easily serve as funneling and a replacement for the Rocket Spear until players have that available to them. At number 3, the Dark Crown is solid. The Dark Crown helps the Minion Prince with his main utility, which is damage and being able to survive to do more damage. Because of this fact, I think that's why the Dark Crown is in the second most used combination at the highest levels of the game currently. At number 2, I would say it's the Meteor Staff. This piece of equipment has gotten a major resurgence, especially after people noticed how much damage you can do passively by just keeping the Prince alive. I will say this is kind of nice because I kind of got validated. I called this out initially when it came out, but it really is a good piece of equipment. At number 1 we have the Dark Orb, and this is a very good piece of equipment because it just slows down the defenses and allows your army to get through them a lot easier. It's super effective and it's a common piece of equipment, which makes it super easy to upgrade, and it's really clear that it's good because at the highest level you can see that it's used ubiquitously among all the combinations for the Minion Prince. Overall, the Minion Prince is a solid hero and one that I think a lot of players will enjoy using, especially for their air attacks. Next up at number 5 we're going to have the Royal Champion. Now the Royal Champion is a hero that unlocks at Town Hall 13, and it's a powerhouse with a pretty wide skill set. Not only does it serve a lot of roles in your attacks, but it actually gets to its maximum level a little bit quicker than some of the other heroes, and that is a great positive. Furthermore, it can be helpful in both ground attacks as well as air attacks, which is also a huge plus. Now the reason that I've rated the Royal Champion a little bit lower overall on the list is because it's actually not seeing that much use at the highest levels of the game right now. That being said, when it comes to other Town Hall levels, I think the Royal Champion is a solid hero to use, especially when you don't have the Dragon Duke yet. The Royal Champion has 7 pieces of equipment currently, so let's go ahead and rank them. At number 7 we have the Royal Gem. This piece of equipment is pretty poor overall because all it really does for your Royal Champion is give it a bunch of health regeneration, and it doesn't really help the effects of your Royal Champion at all. At number 6 we have the Hog Rider Puppet. The Hog Rider Puppet is nice as it can spawn some Hog Riders, but again this is super limited at the higher Town Hall levels because those hogs are just not strong enough on their own. And of course you guys already know that I would never recommend upgrading a piece of equipment that is only good temporarily through some Town Halls and not at the end of the game, just because of how rare ores are. At number 5 we have the Haste Vial. The Haste Vial is useful for sure because it can help you get through some key damage areas with the Royal Champion, especially for things like a Spirit Walk. That being said, it's really not used outside of that combination all that much, and there are just better options. At number 4 we have the Frost Flake. I like the Frost Flake personally. It is a piece of equipment that helps you freeze towards the back end or even a certain compartment of an attack. That being said, it's not being used used that much at the highest levels of the game right now, and for something that you're gonna have to invest a lot into, that is a pretty big negative. At number 3, we have the Seeking Shield. This is kind of crazy considering how old the Seeking Shield is, but the Seeking Shield is actually being used in air attacks and it has a place in the meta currently. It is a super easy equipment to use, it's a common, so it's really easy to upgrade, and it's easy to understand why it is a better piece of equipment right now. At number 2, we have the Rocket Spear. This piece of equipment needs no introduction at all. It does extra damage at extra range, and it can help in the beginning, the middle, or the end of an attack. It's also being used at the highest levels currently by having it being paired with the Seeking Shield. Finally, at the number 1 spot, we have the Electro Boots. Now, although it's true that this piece of equipment is not seeing play at the highest levels of the game currently, it can be devastating at lower Town Hall levels, particularly because it's one of the easiest pieces of equipment to use, and it's really good right out of the gate at level 1. For this reason, the Electro Boots are still the number 1 piece of equipment for me personally. And that summarizes the Royal Champion. Again, a very powerful hero, something that is very fun to use and fits into a ton of attacks. Moving on to our next hero, we have the Barbarian King himself. Now, obviously the Barbarian King is a classic. He was the first hero that was introduced to us so very long ago. What makes him super useful though is his tankiness, the amount of damage he can do, and the wide variety of skills and effects he can apply to your attacks. The King is unlocked super early at Town Hall 7, but unfortunately he does have a ton of levels that you have to do, similar to the Prince and the Archer Queen. He's seeing a lot of usage in the current meta, particularly in ground attacks, so that's really good for him. And the Barbarian King has 8 different pieces of equipment, so let's go ahead and rank them. Easily the worst piece of equipment for him, and arguably in the game, is the Barbarian Puppet. I don't even have to say anything about this, it's just straight up bad. It's meant to be an introductory piece of equipment. The second worst piece of equipment for him is the Vamp Stash, in my opinion. The Vamp Stash is really nice because it can give you that passive heal every time the Barbarian does get a hit, but there are just a lot better abilities out there that can give you a lot more, and thus this equipment isn't that good. At number 6, we have the Rage Vial. The Rage Vial is really nice because if you don't have any epics, this piece of equipment can rage up your king, give him some speed and some damage, but what ends up happening is that it really falls off later on to the other equipment. At number 5, we have the Earthquake Boots. The Earthquake Boots are an iconic piece of equipment that destroy walls and also does percentage damage to buildings around it. It obviously had and still has phenomenal synergy with the Spiky Ball in the past, and even at the highest levels of the game, there is some usage of this combination. That being said, there are other equipment that are going to get used a lot more, and once you have a few of those epics, you will likely shelf the Earthquake Boots as a thing of the past. At number 4, we have the Stick Horse. The Stick Horse is pretty awesome as it allows you to have a speed increase, attack speed increase, and also gives your king the ability to jump over walls, which is super useful. It is used quite a bit with the Giant Gauntlet, and this combination does get some use at the highest levels of the game. That being said, I don't really see it used as much with other combinations, and I don't think it's as good for lower level Town Hall players. At number 3, we have the Giant Gauntlet. Now, this was the first epic equipment for the king, and it is pretty useful as it gives you a little bit of damage reduction as well as area damage, which is really nice. It is obviously used with the Stick Horse as we just spoke about, and it can be used for general funneling as well as trying to get a lot of damage off when the ability is popped. Moving on to number 2, we have the Snake Bracelet. Now, the Snake Bracelet will significantly increase the survivability of your king, especially against those single target defenses that are usually the bane of the king. It is also used a lot with the Spiky Ball, and this combination is the one that's used the most at the highest levels of the game. Not only that, but it's just generally useful, especially for lower Town Hall level players. If you're funneling outside of the base, that king's survivability is very useful, and thus I think it deserves to be up here. At number 1, we have the classic for the Barbarian King, the Spiky Ball. This piece of equipment needs no introduction. It is one of the most devastating pieces of equipment that is entirely easy to use and gives you guaranteed value. Easy and effective means that it's good for players at pretty much any level of the game, and this is highlighted at the highest levels of the game where it is used quite a bit and it is pretty effective. effective. And that summarizes the Barbarian King. Again, a really effective hero with a good set of equipment combinations to work with as you progress through the game with him. Now at our number 3 spot, we have the Archer Queen. Now I know a lot of people are probably not going to be happy about this placement, especially considering how iconic the Archer Queen is for Clash of Clans, but just hear me out on this one. The Archer Queen is a very high damage hero that is available at Town Hall 8 and can serve as a basis for entire attacks, especially early in the game. One downside though is that it does take a long time to upgrade her, similar to the Barbarian King and the Minion Prince. At the highest levels of the game, she's currently seeing usage rates in up to 94% of all attacks, so she is very useful and very good. On top of this, she has 8 different pieces of equipment to choose from, which allows her to serve a variety of roles as you go through your attacks. The reason I didn't place the Archer Queen any higher is because I think she's pretty well balanced and not all of her pieces of equipment are great. Plus there are some attack strategies that do not require the Archer Queen, and that's why we don't have a 100% usage rate. Now let's go ahead and talk about the equipment for the Archer Queen and rank them. At number 8, we have another borderline worst piece of equipment in the game, and that is the Archer Puppet. This thing is trash, and again, just an introductory piece of equipment in general. At number 7, we have the Invisibility Vial. This is a nice and quick boost to the Archer Queen's damage, but the other pieces of equipment just do so much better at this. At number 6, we have the Frozen Arrow. This piece of equipment is epic, but its freeze capability is pretty limited, and its utility is pretty much restricted to Queen charges, so it's not that great. I did rank it a little bit higher than usual because Queen Charge is seeing a resurgence in the meta, but I don't really see anybody using this. At number 5, we have the Healer Puppet. The Healer Puppet is especially useful in ground attacks as it can provide extra healing for your troops, and I think this is really useful when you don't have the epics for the Archer Queen, especially for players at lower Town Hall levels. However, as you guys can see from the usage rates, the higher level players basically never use the healers at all, and I think it's because those healers are pretty weak compared to what you would get if you just brought some healers with you. At number 4, we have the Magic Mirror. Now the Magic Mirror is an awesome piece of equipment for the Archer Queen because it clones the Queen for a certain duration of time, and this allows you to have a huge boost in DPS. It's seeing a little bit of use, particularly in ground strategies at the highest level, which is great. That being said, there are other pieces of equipment that are just stronger and more generalizable. At number 3, we have the Monolith Arrow. This is the newest piece of epic equipment for the Queen, and it allows the Queen to have increased damage with decreased damage taken. It really lends itself to that Queen Charge strategy, and that's where we're seeing it being used a lot. It also has a pretty decent usage rate among ground attacks, pretty much half of the ground attacks at the highest levels currently. At number 2, we have the Giant Arrow. Now the Giant Arrow is a classic piece of equipment that shoots a huge arrow that does damage throughout the entire base, with particularly extra damage against air defenses. Now the Giant Arrow was already a good piece of equipment for air attacks, but now that the rocket backpack is there for the Dragon Duke, using this on ground attacks is also possible, so it's the best it's ever been. The usage rate at the highest levels also reflect that, as it's one of the equipment with the highest usage rate for the Queen currently. On top of that, it's a common piece of equipment, so it's super easy to go ahead and max out, and you can get it early on. A solid piece of equipment, and one that I've always regarded very highly. And our best piece of equipment for the Queen is easily the Action Figure Puppet. The Action Figure Puppet provides an ample amount of survivability for the Queen as well as the rest of your army, and the Giant that spawned as a result of this equipment also does huge amounts of damage, which is an important thing to consider. If you take a look at the usage rates at the highest levels of the game, you can see that it's used in every combination, which just shows you how good it is. The only downside to this piece of equipment is that you do have to invest into it quite a bit for it to be really good, but considering how good this is 100% worth it. And that's the summary for the Archer Queen, easily one of the best and most iconic heroes in Clash of Clans. At our number 2 spot, we have none other than the Dragon Duke. The Dragon Duke is an absolute behemoth when it comes to damage, simply because of his passive ability that he gets, making him really strong. He does unlock pretty late at Town Hall 15, but he is the easiest hero to max out and has the shortest upgrades, which I think is a huge plus. He has 5 pieces of equipment to choose from currently in the game. And when it comes to his usage rates, currently he is used in 99% of all attacks at the highest level, so that just shows you how strong he is. The ability that he has is super powerful, and it's no surprise seeing him all the way up here at the top of the list. Now let's go ahead and look at the 5 pieces of equipment that he has and try to rank them, and this is going to be pretty tough considering how good each one of these pieces of equipment are. At number 5, I'm just going to go ahead and put the Flame blower. This equipment is great as you can go ahead and get a bunch of damage initially whenever you activate it in a wide cone in front of the Dragon Duke. Huge shout out to Shock, by the way, who did like an awesome breakdown of this piece of equipment. That was a really great video. Shock, if you're seeing this, well done. But this equipment is pretty helpful and it does get some usage at the highest level of the game for both air attacks and ground attacks. At number 4, we have the Stun Blaster. The Stun Blaster is an awesome piece of equipment that stuns in a radius around the Dragon Duke. This can be helpful in taking out certain defenses or just getting the Dragon Duke to survive a little bit longer in a certain area of the base. Because of this, you can see that it's being used at the highest levels of the game, particularly in ground attacks. What's great about this piece of equipment and the last one is that they're both common, so it's really easy to go ahead and upgrade them and get them to those higher levels. At number 3, we have the Electro Fangs. I'm not gonna lie, I was completely wrong when this equipment first came out because it is a lot better than I said it was initially. This piece of equipment has the ability to shock nearby buildings to the one that Dragon Duke is attacking, similar to an Electro Dragon. It's a common piece of equipment, which means the investment is really low and it's pretty easy to use because it's completely passive. On top of that, it has pretty good usage rates at the highest levels of the game, and it does get used for ground and air attack strategies with a particular preference towards ground strategies. The thing about this piece of equipment is that you do have to wait until Town Hall 17 to go ahead and unlock it, but considering you have to wait until Town Hall 15 for the Dragon Duke itself, it's not even that bad. At number 2, we have the only epic for the Dragon Duke, and that is the Rocket Backpack. The Rocket Backpack is a piece of equipment that helps the Dragon Duke blow across the entire base and do damage to anything he goes over, similar to the Giant Arrow. In fact, the Rocket Backpack for the Dragon Duke and the Giant Arrow for the Archer Queen have become a very popular combination in air attacks, and this is something that you guys can see at the highest levels of the game, as the usage rates for the Rocket Backpack are pretty high for both ground attacks and particularly for air attacks. And at number 1, we have the Fire Heart. Now, this is a piece of equipment that everybody since release has been saying is super strong, and they are correct. Not only does it have the ability to do some death damage, but it also allows the Dragon Duke to have a ridiculous self-healing per second and a decent hit point increase as well. It's a common piece of equipment that's completely passive, so it's easy to use and it's also easy to upgrade. Not to mention that it's being used quite a bit at the highest levels of the game now across both ground attacks and air attacks, so it's a very good piece of equipment. And that summarizes the Dragon Duke, which is easily one of the strongest heroes in the game right now, not only due to its innate ability, but also the phenomenal set of equipment that it has. But at our number 1 hero spot right now, we have none other than the Grand Warden. I know this sounds absolutely crazy because the Warden himself doesn't do all that much, but hear me out. First off, the Grand Warden is the only hero with a 100% usage rate at the highest levels of the game. But forget the highest levels of the game for a second. I don't see any attack that any player will do where the Grand Warden is not being used. And no, it's not due to his phenomenal stats. His stats are pretty bad. He basically does no damage at all and he's very squishy. What makes the Grand Warden so good is his equipment. Not only does it benefit himself, but it also benefits the other heroes and the rest of your army. He has 7 pieces of equipment available, so let's go ahead and rank them. At number 7, to my heart's dismay, is actually the Lava Loon Puppet. I didn't want to do it, but I had to, and it's pretty unfortunate. The Lava Loon Puppet is an epic piece of equipment that allows you to spawn lava loons into your army. This is a really cool ability, but it's not really used all that often, and it's not as good as it should be. On top of this, considering that it's an epic equipment and that you're going to have to invest starry ores into it, it is super expensive and very hard to justify. At number 6, we have the Life Gem. The Life Gem is a piece of equipment that gives all the troops in its aura a passive hit point increase, and it also gives some passive stats to the Grand Warden. This hit point increase is better in some armies versus others, and even at the highest level of the game, we are seeing Life Gem usage right now, especially with throwers, which are definitely in the meta. That being said, I don't see the Life Gem being used as much as the other equipment that are coming ahead of it, especially for players who are at the lower Town Hall levels. At number 5, we have the Rage Gem. Now, the Rage Gem is a piece of equipment that adds damage to your troops, but it does not add movement speed. And let me tell you, this equipment is not useless by any means. I know it's at number 5, but it's actually very helpful, especially through the Town Hall levels. At the highest levels of the game right now, it is also seeing some use, which is great. It's a very strong piece of equipment to have and something that I would recommend all players upgrade. At number 4, we have the Healing Tome. The Healing Tome is a piece of equipment that for a certain duration of time will heal all of the troops troops in its aura at a certain heal per second. This is a very strong ability that can be used with softer armies to make sure that they get through the base. At the highest levels of the game, it's used in almost 90% of the air attacks, and that just shows you how useful it is, especially with an army like dragons. I think it has a place in some attacks as you go through the town hall levels, and again, another equipment that I would recommend. At number 3, we have the fireball. Now the fireball obviously does not need any introduction. It's a piece of equipment that summons a huge fireball onto the nearest defense and does catastrophic damage. And as you guys know, there have been a lot of strategies to use the fireball in the past, and in fact, a lot of those strategies were defined by the fireball itself. However, that really doesn't seem to be the case in the meta right now, as the fireball isn't being used as much at the higher levels. That being said, I think the fireball is definitely something that is always going to be meta relevant or very close to being so, and as a result, I would highly recommend players do upgrade and use it. At number 2, we have the heroic torch. Now this is a piece of equipment that has received some buffs after its release to go ahead and make it a little bit more relevant, and what it does is it allows your troops to jump over walls with both a speed increase as well as a damage reduction for a specific amount of time. This is particularly helpful with slower moving troops, and that's why we see it a lot with super bowlers. At the highest level of the game, close to 80% of the attacks that are ground attacks in general have been using this piece of equipment, and it's no surprise why, because it is very good. And at the number 1 spot, we have the Eternal Tome. Now the Eternal Tome has been one of my favorite pieces of equipment for a long time, and it's also been out of the meta for a little bit, which has been tough. But given its ability, it's one of the best pieces of equipment in the game because it allows invincibility for all of your troops in its aura for a certain amount of time. Not only is this piece of equipment super easy to use, but it's also super easy to upgrade because it's just a common piece of equipment. And when we look at the usage rates across the highest levels of the game, 80% of all attacks, ground and air, are using this piece of equipment, which is pretty significant. I think it's probably one of the most safest and effective pieces of equipment for players to invest into, especially if you're new or returning. It's no surprise why the Grand Warden is the strongest hero currently if you look at all of the great equipment that he has available to him. The issue is the equipment themselves are not going to help you get to that higher level that we keep talking about in this video. For most of these equipment, if you don't have the ores to upgrade them, it actually doesn't matter what combination you use because it's gonna fall flat. That's why you need to watch this video right here where I break down every way that players can get more ores no matter what town hall level you are.